Sorry for the delay. It's always something happening with the stock, apparently. You know, must be the security thing. So, welcome. We're going to look at monitoring Java application security with JDK tools and JFR events, some of the techniques that you can use as Java developers, and connect that and how you can expand that within the setup of your applications later on. And throughout the demos, I'll receive some help because I'm having a handheld mic, and I need to code and speak. So Brian Vermeer here in front is going to be my assistant and hold the mic. So we thought that since it's a security talk, another security person should. I had a choice actually. It was Laurențiu and Brian. So and they draw. Brian won. Anyway, and there is Spring Security also in the talk. So anyway. So there's something for you as well, Laurențiu. Hello, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me and coming to this talk in such a great number. I'm a little bit nervous because we had these technical issues, but I'm happy to be here in front of you to talk to you more about Java and about Java security and how you can use JDK tools. I currently work as a Java developer advocate at Oracle in the Java Platform Group team. And, well, yes, you can find me on social media at Ambra1508 and, of course, on Mastodon. Well, I occasionally post about things that I'm doing or presentations to the conferences that I'm going to, what I'm investigating. Recently, we had a live stream about Java 22 launch. I was there, live coding as well. Yeah, I'll share a few more details, a few more useful links at the end of the presentation of where you can learn more about Java. So let's dive into the agenda of today. First of all, we're going to look at the security events overview. So look at what JFR security events are, or JFR events are, and what are specific to this JFR security events. How many are they, how are they named, and so on. Then we're going to look into how we can observe JDK security properties. What do we have at hand to do that, and maybe why do we want to do that? Then we're going to look at monitoring the TLS protocol. Then look into the analyzing of X509 certificates, how we can do that as well. And of course, how in the end can we achieve continuous monitoring in the cloud. And at the end of the presentation, hopefully, I didn't check yet the cloud, but there is a small game for you to play. So those being said with the goal, let's go with the overview. So the JDK Flight Recorder events, they are there to offer you information about how your JVM and how your application and underlying JVM are working. JFR can collect these events throughout the lifetime of your application, and usually when you're using JFR, you're using it for profiling your application. You store event data in a JFR file, and most of the time, these events have some components that can help you later on. So each JFR event has all these components there. You see that the event-specific payload is bigger because that differs from event to event. Sometimes particular events have more in the payload and more fields, to say so. But the JFR file itself is great because it collects all these events that we want to trace if we have enabled collecting them. And moreover, contains metadata of describing these events, but also holds data necessary so that you can resolve events in a specific order. So there's a precedings of events that is being stored in the JFR file. It's not just thrown there and then you later on figure out how they were collected. Particular to JDK Flight Recorder security events, there are 6 of them in the JDK at the moment. And some of them became available starting with JDK 12, but they are also backported to JDK 8 and 11. That's why you sometimes see backported to 8 and 11, but they're also available to the later versions. And others appeared in JDK 20. So all these are important for us because monitoring the underlying security configuration of our Java application can offer us insights over the overall strength of our application. And we can get an understanding about the cryptographic standards that our application is using, or maybe we should change something about it. So in JDK 12, if you look at this table, there are 4 events that were becoming available. Specifically, the second one, the JDK security property modification, the JDK TLS handshake, and the 2 related to X509 certificates. The only one that's enabled by default is the one regarding the initial security properties. The other ones are not enabled by default, and I know there's very small font there, but you're going to get the slides. But they're enabled by default in the default.gfc and profile.gfc files that are shipped within the JDK. So when you get Java JDK on your machine, you get these two profiles already configured for you. And that's what enabled by default means, enabled by default in those two. But we're going to look into how we can enable them back on the road and why they're good to be enabled. So let's start by observing the JDK security properties. To observe the initial security properties, there are a few ways to do that. We can go into the conf security file and look with our own eyes and see them. So this is a statical way of defining the security properties. Now, throughout the lifecycle of an application, you can change those security properties by using the Java security methods. So once you set something in the security file, you can change that programmatically. But if you want to know what were your initial security properties when your application started, you can always enable the debug with that specific value on properties. The thing is, if you're enabling debug, well, there's a lot that you usually catch in the logs of your application. And you might end up having more and more logs and lose these properties throughout your log files. And then you have to have a log analyzer, just search for them. It's not an easy thing to maintain, right? So how about if we're using the JDK initial security property JFR event, which is enabled by default in the configuration file, and record what were those in the beginning. So how that can be used? Well, since I said it's enabled by default, I don't need to do an extra setting. And I can use even start flight recording with the settings on default for this one. Or I can start a flight recording using JDK Mission Control. So if I already have a running application, maybe I forgot to enable my application with -XX start flight recording. It's fine. I can always use JDK Mission Control to do that, to connect to it and get that. But that's just the beginning. Things can change. So if things change, what do we use? If things change, we can get a complete view of the changes in the JDK security properties by using the second event that was related to these ones, the security property modification. Now, since this one is not enabled by default in the profiles, you need to do that. And you can do that by either using JFR configure command, and there you have the exact command on how you can enable it. After you're doing this, actually, you can start your flight recording. So just use the same settings, but now that you use JFR configure, you had an effect on that default file. And later on, once you have a recording, you can inspect it with GCMD or with JDK Mission Control. We're going to use both in a little while. So that's one way to do it. But there are some extra tips. And I've seen that sometimes people don't know about those because they're not that well documented sometimes. So you can configure more JFR events by adding a space between each setting when you are running JFR configure. So for example, if you want to enable more events, you can just run JFR configure in a space, like in the example here. Or you can start your application by configuring more events enabled by default, right? By just adding a comma and a plus, and then say the enable to true. Or you can set more JFR events when you launch the JVM, add them more. Or you can configure each JFR event within JDK Mission Control. JDK Mission Control has a very nice interface, so it's easier to deal with the templates that are there and configure your events from there, for example. So you can create a connection to running JVM. You can also go in the GMC menu. That's how you get there. Start flight recording. And you can configure each security event or each JFR event that you want to have enabled. Of course, which threshold you want for that specific event and so on. So you can catch it and observe it throughout time. And of course, you can inspect the evolution of those events in JDK Mission Control. by going through Event Browser, Java Development Kit, and Security. To give you an example, that's how it looks like if I go through a recording, and I'm going through Event Browser. I typed in here security because sometimes I just don't want to go through each of the events to find my own. I know they're related to a specific area in the JDK, so I just type that and I find it. So in this case, I searched for security-related JFR events, and it got me 3 that contain security in their name. Particularly, in this case, I'm looking at the security provider instance request. So I'm going to look at how many times was the security provider instance request sampled within my recording. And I can look, of course, at the values of the, what is captured in the event, in each sample, or I can have a nice graph, like in the case of heat map view here. So you can see there was a heat map of 115 events recorded in just 1 minute. This gives you information about which security providers were in use by our application. Gives you information about the type of service from that particular service provider that was used. And of course, if you are enabled for some of the events, the stack trace, you kind of get also the stack trace on how that was selected as well. And we'll see that in a moment. So that's about the security properties. Let's think about monitoring TLS protocol. Let's start a bit about why is that important for us as developers. So we are configuring SSL and TLS for our applications, well, lately TLS, because SSL is not considered as strong and efficient as TLS anymore, for several reasons. We want to ensure that our application gives confidentiality to our end users, right? We're protecting their data. Only the authorized users are having that. And we have confidentiality ensured by encryption and decryption, right? Then we get authenticity. Only certain users that have certain certificates can use our applications. And of course, there's message integrity to signing and message digest so that we don't end up with situations when the data gets corrupted when it's in transit. So to capture TLS protocol information, there are a few ways to do that. Back in the day, I used to have a tool called Wireshark that I was attaching to the network interface to see the packages and what's going on there, and I was analyzing those. You can still, I think, use it. And so this is a network protocol analyzer tool that you can attach to your network interface where your JVM is communicating. Then if you want to determine, for example, which TLS version your application is using, search for server hello record in that, and you're going to get the details. But this means extra tool, know the network interface, and I don't know, introducing new things within your application. Why not use something that's friendly for the JDK, for your Java app? So one way to do this is by enabling debug as well, getting in the logs with SSL handshake. Moreover, get more filtered logging and get it SSL handshake related to your key store, trust store that is in use for your application so that you can get only that essential information. But moreover, as said earlier, logs, there are many of them throughout time, right? Searching through them is not always easy. So maybe configuring the JDK TLS handshake JFR event would get me to more things. But first, we're going to look at an example of the server hello. So if we are to look at the server hello record that was captured by the network analyzer, in many situations, its output would be like this. Oh, sorry, the server hello captured in the logs. I forgot about it. That's a print screen from the logs. So the output above shows which TLS version was used by the application. Now, some of you might be tempted to say that, okay, the version that was used was TLS version 1.2. No, the version that was used was the selected version, which is TLS version 1.3. This gives us information also about which cipher suits are being used by the application when doing the TLS handshake. And by the way, if you're using Spring Boot, there's a way to configure the cipher suits that your application is using, like restrict a little bit which cipher suits are being used through Spring Security. And of course, which name groups are being used by the key of this specific TLS handshake. So this is how the output looks like. But as I said, this is in logs. They can be lost at some point through its verbosity. So how about capturing the protocol using TLS handshake? Again, a few ways to do that. So assuming that we already have a JFR file configured with earlier configurations, you can switch all the options where you find JDK TLS handshake to true. Or you can run JFR configure once again and have that enabled. In this case, you see it's not just enabled to true, you also have the option to get the stack trace of that TLS handshake. So if you enable the stack trace, you get also which classes were called within the TLS handshake. And of course, last but not least, you can start a recording with TLS handshake enabled as well with this detail. So pretty much, if you don't want to use JFR configure or you don't know where to go for the JFR configuration file, you can always go at your startup and launch the application with TLS handshake enabled. So that's another way to do it. A local demo. So now we're going to go through the demo part of the talk. So first of all, I have a Spring Boot application. We're going to play tic-tac-toe today. One of my colleagues said that it's not a very smart tic-tac-toe, so you're going to win a lot, which is, I think, good for a Friday afternoon. And my Spring Boot application, of course, doesn't want to let unauthorized users to use it. So I would need to provide a client certificate on my side to be able to access a specific endpoint and play tic-tac-toe. But moreover, I want to make sure that my user is trusted, so I'm using a key store and a truster to do that. So it's going to be mutual TLS enablement between me, the end user in the browser, and the application itself. We're going to monitor it with JDK tools. And the reason why I have here the local ext file, it's the extension file that I used for my application, because I needed to work with these on localhost, but also at some point remotely in the cloud. So that's why you see there Spring Boot as the DNS.2 name. So without further ado, Brian, thank you very much.
I love this job.
Okay, so it's a weird setup, but yeah. So first of all, let's look at the let's look at the application itself. So as I said earlier, we're going to play tic-tac-toe. A typical Spring Boot application running tic-tac-toe. I've used Bootstrap in it, so it's nothing fancy from a front-end point of view, by the way. Anyway, so what I want now is to inspect the TLS handshake for my application. Let's do it easy with my local. And for this situation, I'm just going to start the Java application and just run it. Run. Uh-oh. Port in already in use. No worries. You can lower that a bit. Okay, thank you. Okay. But I think my Docker compose down. I think that was the problem with it. Yes, my application was running already in Docker compose. Let me try again. Second time is a charm. Again? Just get, no, it says the service. No, I can do it better. I don't need, I think, this one for the moment. No. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah, well, JMX is not needed. Huh? Come on. Now I'm nervous about this. How is it? GDS. Tic-tac-toe application. Okay. Kill -9. Yeah. Okay, now let's see. Yeah, it started. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I want to show here is that I was in a hurry. I didn't think about enabling JFR to capture the events, but I want to capture the security properties, right? So, well, this happens. But I have a profile where I have the TLS handshake set on enable, right? So what I can do in this case is go here. Let's make this a little bigger. And start a file recording with JCMD. Just first of all, let me make sure that I'm running on Java 22. Now query JPS because I'm running on my local for the ID of my application. JCMD 2996 JFR.start. And now I have to say settings. It's my local, my profile.gfc. A duration, 120 seconds. And capture my information where in tls.2.jfr. I have a backup tls.jfr just in case something goes bad. Okay, so the recording started for my application. Let's go to the browser really quickly. Let's go in a private browser, localhost 88443, just say register. Okay, I forgot to say it's a self-signed certificate. You get the details on how to do it in the repo. So this is why this happens. It's a self-signed certificate, so it has issues with this. But this didn't work too easy. I have to provide something else. Not okay? You start JCMD. Sorry about this. I was in a hurry and I forgot to enable something. Stop. What I forgot to enable is in my resources because I said I want to use mutual authentication. Okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Thanks. So what I did earlier, I actually enabled my key store for my application so anybody could connect to my local host and play this. But I said I want to have a specific certificate to do that. Say the cloud authentication needs to be done. So let's change this to use the trust stores again and start the application again. Stop and rerun. We're going to do exactly the same stuff. Okay. Go here. It's again JPS, started on a different port. So JCMD 300 299 JFR.start. How was that settings? My profile.gfc. Duration 2 minutes. And the location file name equals TLS 2.jfr. Yep. Okay, so the recording started. Let's go again to the browser. Oh, it doesn't let me. I have to provide the certificate. Okay, so I need to import my own certificate to this one, which is Anna P12. Give the password for my certificate. Very safe password, by the way. It's there in the repo, so yeah. So now I'm being asked, hey, you're going to use the certificate which has the common name Anna. Do you want to use it? Yeah. Now I can play tic-tac-toe. So let me register. Again, a very safe password. You can already guess it. Don't do that in the real life. It's just for tic-tac-toe. So I can play tic-tac-toe, and I lost because I wasn't paying attention. Can play again, log out, and so on. So let's go back to here. Not sure if my recording captured something since I should have played a little longer actually, because it started at 13:42. Now it's just 1 minute. I said to do it 2 minutes, and I want to have something in it. Okay, let's play another tic-tac-toe game. I know it's not that fun with you not being able to do it as well, but at the end, you'll be able to do it. Okay, computer seems to be very good at this. Let's put some effort. Okay, I win, finally. Okay, just trying to have the 2 minutes for the game to go on, for recording to be there. Okay, so reload from disk. JCMD 30299 GFR.stop. Let's hope that this dumps something for me. Yeah, please, please. No, I stopped it too early for this one. Okay, well, let's investigate the TLS GFR, my backup for this one, because I have a backup. So the way I would investigate what I captured, if I would have captured something a little earlier, would be to use JFR as well. So how to do that? Easy. I have my Java home and say bin JFR. I'm going to say print minus events. I know that I want to investigate TLS related stuff, so I can use even regular expressions like this. And TLS.jfr. So what I captured here are my TLS handshakes, right? And I can see how many of them are. So usually, because this is a localhost trial, it's not available for peer host. But if you're deploying this somewhere online, you can see the peer host, also the peer port, and so on, through a regular server. Moreover, you can see the certificate ID that is being used for this particular TLS handshake. And moreover, you can see a stack trace on what was called when doing the handshake itself, right? Within the JDK and how many events were recorded. So this is one way to investigate it. Thank you very much. Brian, you're very helpful. There will be 2 more demos, God. So to recap a bit, this is pretty much what I did. Now I replaced the LLVM ID with the ID that I used in JPS command. I used the print JFR command, and this is how it would look like if we would have used the server or something like this. You could see a peer host, a port, and not a local host like in my case earlier, and some stack trace there. So that's for the TLS handshake, but let's see for the X509 certificates, what we have there. So why do we care about them? Well, earlier I used the certificate so that I can go to my application and play tic-tac-toe. So I had to provide Anna.p12 to play tic-tac-toe. So the certificates are useful to bind my identity to the one that I'm trying to access to. So to identify me as a user that's authorized to go there. Yes, you can do that with users and passwords too, but maybe there are situations when you don't want to allow users to even know the location of your application. So they establish trust based on a few fields. And we're going to observe these fields that we have here later with the JFR events. Especially what is important for us, obviously, validity period. Nobody wants to use expired certificates, right? But also, like in my case earlier, the common name was important as well. So Miana, that uses a common name that is known by the server, can go and access tic-tac-toe. So to view certificate details, with JDK tools, we have a few options. I mean, we have keytool that can always help us to list what certificate authority certificates we have in the key store with the kcerts. So we can use the keytool minus kcerts option, or if we want to list the certificates that we have in a specific key store that we created, like in my case, keystore.p12, I could just say keytool minus v minus list to do that. And of course, if I want to look at the certificates that my application is using, I can always use the debug. So I can use javasecurity.debug to cert path, and then they're available once again. But with JFR, what I can do, I can enable those 2 events that were related. One about the certificate details, the X509 certificate, and the second one about X509 validation, so when the validation of the certificates is happening on the application. So we can go directly and modify the JFR file that is just extracted from a JFR file. Or more arrogantly, we can use once again JFR configure as we trust it as a command. Or we can enable those options with the Java launcher. So there are multiple ways, once again, to do that and enable these. But if we want to capture the details of the certificates, the JCMD and JFR, you can always start your application with -x start file recording and have the flags enabled. Or after this one, you can also execute a JCMD command like I did earlier. But in this case, for example, for --print events, I can even use directly the name of the event, like JDK.X509 certificate, and it will be printed. And that's an example output of what the certificate details will be showing to me. So what's important? I think the algorithm, because sometimes algorithms get weakened. So it's important to know that you're not using certificates that employ weak algorithms that are not okay for the application, because from JDK perspective, they're not okay to be used anymore. Secondly, it's important who's the issuer of that certificate. And thirdly, is important to know the validity from and until. So this one started in 2006. It's using SHA-1 with RSA, which is not necessarily safe anymore. And it's valid until 2036, 16th of July, 2036. So Brian, once again, come here. I'm sorry for you. Okay, let me stop the application, if I can just go to this one, because I'm using the same port for all my applications. Now, I said earlier that I would like to run my application not only locally, but also somewhere else. So if I want to do that, I want to port my configuration somehow to another location. And for this time, I didn't want to use Kubernetes. I used Podman Compose to run it later on. So what I did, I defined a Docker Compose with my application. I gave here a lot of JDK Java options. But the thing is, I want to be able to connect remotely through that application in the cloud later on, right? So the way I can do this and inspect it with the JFR Events, maybe I can do a recording via JMX from JDK Mission Control. So I have configured here JMX with, of course, user and password, so I'm doing this securely. Also because Brian would look at me very angrily if I'm not using this securely. So only a user with a specific password can go and connect and collect those events, even via JDK Mission Control. Again, my key stores, again, the ports, and, well, I thought it would be nice to monitor it, and it's easy and available there, Prometheus. So maybe if I want to monitor from my local, some other places, or even the cloud, I can use Prometheus later on. Okay, so let me go here again. Uh-oh. Clear. You know what would be funny now? For the Docker daemon to not work. Okay. Okay, let's see. So let's start the application. It takes a while to download everything. Okay. So my application started. Good. Now I still have the certificate in the browser, so it should be fine for me to use it. Let me see. It's the same port on localhost. Okay, so but if I would try to log in, because I started it from another instance, it doesn't know me. Okay, let me close this one for a moment and go to JDK Mission Control to do my recording. New, connect. Create a new connection. Localhost, because I'm still running it on my local, 1099. And now my user and password. It's a very secure password. Hope I remember it correctly. Test my connection. It's pass1, if you wonder. It's there in the repo, so yeah. The admin is connecting with pass1. I want to start a flight recording. I'm going to give a very meaningful name called my recording. Use a template for my recording, like I said earlier, using a template in GMC. And I can create my own template or use my own template, which is called TLS. It's already having the events enabled. Is that next? Just making sure that they are all good and they're enabled. Let's see. Security property true. So everything is for true when it comes to security. Good. Let's finish this. Okay, so now let's go once again to the browser. Private window, 8443. Okay, once again, I have to go through this. Yes, I'm Anna. I already imported the certificate, thank God. I registered earlier, I think. Did I? No, I didn't, I forgot. So once again, I'm using the same password, which you shouldn't do, by the way, for different installations. Okay, so let's do it. Oh, I won. I'm so good. Okay, so once again, this one is going to record for 1 minute, so it's going to be a faster recording of my data. I just want to capture some events on the other side. Okay, do not give up. 85% here in terms of recording. Okay, let's play one more. I can win. Yeah, the computer won the game. I'm not very lucky, apparently. Okay, the computer didn't find any problems with this recording. Of course not. It's a very safe application. So now let's see if I captured something. Yes, I did. So if I'm just searching in the event type for X509, I'm getting the details about my certificates. Now, because I already had my certificate ANA already imported in the browser, I have only recordings of the fact that, yes, the certificate is known and the server acknowledged it. So this is taking only the acknowledgement from the server side of the certificate authority that I have on that side and recognizing my certificate already imported. But still, my certificate went through validation. So it was validated when that pop-up said, like, hey, your certificate common name, ANA, do you accept it? It was validated. So that's how I was able to capture it. And once again, GMC is great because it gives us some very nice graphs, like, for example, dependency view that shows the dependency to different packages within the JDK for the events that were captured. So what's the dependency there? Obviously, it's Sun Security, Java Lang, Java Security, and JDK internal. And some org Apache because, well, I'm using Spring Security, so probably that one is there as well. That was it, Brian. Thank you very much for your help. Yes, one round of applause for our lovely assistant. So that's one way to do it, but I could have done it like earlier. I could have just printed the events from the JFR recording and observe what is in each of those. So that's another way to do it as well. But I thought that I want to try like it's remotely. So let's speak about the cloud now, like moving on to even more remote. So I had earlier a Compose setup. Maybe I can use it to install my application anywhere. It would be cool, right? So historically speaking, to get the JFR events somehow and look at them, you had only this option that I showed you earlier, JDK Mission, until JDK 16, sorry. You had this option of using JDK Mission Control, connect on via JMX, and monitor a Java process via JMX, like I showed you earlier. There's nothing wrong about it, it's good. However, how long can you do this? You're a human, right? You need some way to continuously monitor what's going on with your application without looking in the JDK Mission Control all the time. So since JDK 16, you can transfer these recorded events yourself programmatically, thanks to JFR Events. So JDK Flight Recording, what JDK Flight Recorder has right now, it has not just this ability to give you the JFR file and inspect it with JCMD and so on, but it also has the ability for an API to stream those events later on and observe those events in monitoring tools, other monitoring tools, right? So, thinking about monitoring a remote host. To monitor programmatically, I had my application enabled, JMX enable, right? So I don't even have to think about maybe starting the flight recorder with the -XX nowadays. I can write another piece of code like this one and connect to that application programmatically and get the events from it without having the flight recorder enabled. Because thanks to MBean server connection and JMX RMI, I can do that. And what this does is actually putting into code what JDK Mission Control was doing until JDK 16. Now, this is called monitoring a remote host, but it's from outside of the process. Now, if you want to monitor a host without going outside of an application, you can also stream the events within the same JVM process as your application, right? Because it makes sense. So what my application has is one of these, so that I can stream the events, the security events related to my application, to another location, right? So that's the magic code, let's say so. And because I'm using a metrics registry, I thought it would be nice to export a gauge of JDK X509 validation in this case. So how do I evolve this one? There's, of course, a reason on evolving this one. The reason why I used Docker Compose is also because when I am running my application in a remote location, I can substitute the volume, and I attach the volume outside of my running application for a key store, right? In this case. I can monitor that application very nicely, in this case Prometheus, because it was there in my Compose file, why not? I can also configure Prometheus from a configuration file externally. But what my application has interesting is that it's running in a VM, in a virtual machine, in Oracle Cloud. So I was able to, first of all, make an Oracle Cloud instance with Java, and that is given in another repo at the end, by the way. So I can spin up and spin down this instance just with Java. Secondly, I am able to use Prometheus for monitoring, but also something that the cloud has, so I can use multiple stuff to monitor my application. So if I want to gather the metrics and have them very nicely in another tool like Grafana, I can do that, thanks to Prometheus as a data source, for example. But if I want to be lazy and not care that much about making my own metrics, I can also use another service from the Oracle Cloud, which is called Java Management Service, which has security analyzers within it, gives you ideas on how you can migrate your application to newer Java versions, and gives you indication on this is what you need to do to migrate your Spring Boot application to the latest JVM, and also knows how to optimize JVM tuning without me knowing all the JVM flags, which I don't know, by the way. So it's a pretty cool tool, and because I had the advantage of deploying in the Oracle Cloud, I was able to enable this automatically for my instance. And now for the last part, play and observe. Please scan here. Now, this is a self-signed certificate, so you will need to accept the fact that it's going to say it's a little vulnerable, blah, blah, blah thingy. Again, self-signed certificate. But I need data from you so that you can play and we can look into it. And please do not forget your password. I don't know your passwords, by the way. But if you forget that, there's no way to reset it. I haven't implemented the remind me password or something like this. It's too much to do, and yeah, then I need to send you an email. Complicated. I don't want to know your data. I just want to have some volume. So I think I'm going to let you play for a few minutes. Taking a breath here. Or Brian, finally, you're having a good rest. Yeah. And yes, it's a not very smart game. Also, if you win multiple times, I'm sorry, there's not much that I can offer. I think I have some stickers in my backpack. Okay. So, okay, let me see my Prometheus instance. So I have my application deployed, so there's a Prometheus that looks into it from time to time. And I just want to see the JDK TLS handshake total. So for example, in the last hour, as nobody interacted with the cloud, you can see that there was nothing happening there. But let me make this to 15 minutes. Now, once I told you at 15:01 to start, you can see that a lot of TLS handshakes happened because you were playing the application. So the thing is that if you want, you can correlate the information that you get from your JFR events in tools like Prometheus and aggregate them with other data from your application in there as well. Even security information can be done like that. Now, another tip that I have for you, if you're using environment variables or you're concerned about passing secrets in the events and you think that, hey, maybe there are things that I shouldn't be able to see, something that you can use particularly for your recordings, it's the command JFR scrub. What it does, you can scrub the recording for those particular details so that don't remain there written. But that works only for the recording side. For the events itself, when you stream them, I need to investigate a little more on how you can do things. But I know that this question came up at an earlier talk I gave, and they were like, how can I hide environment variables if by mistake I'm passing them to the events? So if it's a profile, it's a .jfr file of a recording, you can scrub it. JFR scrub, it's the way. Okay. So I hope you had fun. Now, if you want to know more about Java, security, and others, we're most of the time publishing videos about that on our channel on youtube.com/Java. Also, we are publishing articles, many of them related to security on inside.java. So there's always an update coming from my colleague from the JDK security team, Sean Millen, about what's new with each Java release in the security side of Java. And many more others there. And of course, a written summary of this talk exists on dev.java in the security section of it, because I wrote an article and then I expanded the article to this talk later on, so that people can see it in action too, not just statically written. So make sure to have these bookmarked. It's really good information, it's vetted by very experienced people, and we're continuously improving that. Another thing that you should know is that we're accepting community contributions on dev.java. So if you want to write a piece on dev.java, there's a repo where you can sign a contribution agreement and, of course, contribute yourself to dev.java with your knowledge. These are the links of today, but I'm going to give you a QR to the slides, which contains everything. So in the links, there's the article that I mentioned, where you can use the events and the JDK tools, and I think there's a little bit more tricks in the article than in the presentation. So take a look at that one. How to use JFR, my colleague Billy Coranda made a very long, not very long, but a longer episode on how to use it of Stack Walker. And of course, the code that was used, tic-tac-toe, available in my repo. And there's another article on my blog on how I built my VM with Java. So that one, and the code for that one is available as well. So, and of course, I think the cost of this doesn't cost me anything, because there's a good free tire with OCI. So here you go. So pretty much having this online for you right now is zero cost. And I could have fun together with you here today. So all these articles, everything's documented. There is a proof in the repos so that you can try it yourselves. And thank you very much for listening to me. This is where you find the slides with all the links and everything. And I'm welcoming questions for the next 8 minutes, if I'm not getting over the next speaker. Yes?
This whole Java Flight Recorder thing, what is the use case for this? Like, are we monitoring TLS handshakes if the version or the certificate is expired? Or can we do something more with this? Like, can we monitor like other JVM events, like, I don't know, like memory problems or something?
So this talk was focused on JFR security events, but at the moment there are approximately 150 JFR events in total, so other events related to memory and something else happening in the JVM are there available by default, so these are related to JVM, but you can define your own JFR events programmatically, so you can add something on top of that related to your application and make your own events that can be captured further. So it's not just these. These was the focus of this talk, only these 6, but there are more, like 140 more, plus more.
Okay, and as a little bit of a follow-up, so these like we're logging these TLS information to like something to Prometheus. Doesn't it like pollute the logs a lot? Like maybe this is like would be more appropriate to do it occasionally using the tool that you showed, because like what kind of information would we be monitoring? Is like if our certificate has expired, or like, is it actually a good idea to flood like the logs with these events, if that makes sense?
This is not in logs, by the way. That's what I showed you earlier. You stream these events so you don't have them in logs. You stream them to Prometheus, which gets that specific gauge in that case. And that Prometheus takes samples at a certain time, so you can calibrate that for a specific endpoint. And there is more fine-tuning that you can do at Prometheus level, but also what you can do for the events themselves. So most of the events are enabled for a certain threshold. So for example, I think even in my recordings, they're for like threshold 0, but if you don't want to capture events that are below a certain threshold, you can set that one higher and just capture events above a certain threshold. This is just for example, not, and again, logs are not polluted. That was the reason that I was saying, like, you can use the Java -6 Java -6 debug, but then you're going to get a lot of logs. But if you use JFR, or if you're using the event streaming, you're going to send them to a proper monitoring tool where it's okay to have them, because you want them correlated with something else within your monitoring system.
Okay, that's clear, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
What value should I get concerned about? So I'm monitoring this Java security events. What should I be looking for if I'm being attacked or something? Or
So
what's the value for these metrics? I'm not clear. Why should I care at all? How many handshakes do I have? How many? I mean,
So you
in
can,
my projects, we are not monitoring this kind of stuff.
so for example, you can look at the duration of the events and you can capture the duration of those handshakes and think about if the TLS handshake is taking too long, why is that happening? Might be a problem on your application side. Secondly, on the certificates, it's good to take a look at them from the perspective of their details, especially from the validity point of view, and like look at that and have that correlated with something else. Of course, in profiling, it's way easier, but if you just want to have them all together with something else, it's also good to export them to Prometheus or other places where you can capture those monitoring events. So use your choice how you want to use this information and export and crunch it later on. I just gave some examples so that you know that this is possible, and you can crunch it as a counter, as a gauge, and so on, and look at it throughout the time on its evolution. Thanks.